She drank cold water every day as if it were a meal, even though she knew it wouldn't ease her hunger. It was simply a habit she had developed since childhood. She was always the last to wake up, the last to eat, because no one reminded her. By the time she arrived at the cafeteria, the others had already finished their meals. But it wasn't that she wanted to be like this. She had lived an invisible existence since she was 3 years old. Originally, she had gone out with her classmates to make friends, but when the event ended, she was the only one forgotten. After that, she was sent to an orphanage. Her parents never came back for her, as if they had completely forgotten he existed. And so, she stayed in the orphanage. At 15, the orphanage finally allowed her to attend school and even arranged daily transportation for her. A girl who had never received any attention in her life suddenly found herself noticed, but in a different way. The orphanage covered her tuition, but she had to figure out how to pay for her meals. Without proper identification, even finding a job was difficult. Fortunately, the orphanage found her a well-paying job. She only had to pick up medicine from the hospital and deliver it to a designated person. Where the medicine went, she had no idea. Day after day, she thought this was how her life would always be. But fate took a turn, all because of a single sentence from a street thug. If those words had come from a rich person, she would have dismissed them as a joke. But hearing them from someone just like he, struggling at the bottom of society, made her wake up. For the first time, beyond her daily routine, she began spending her nights studying tirelessly in the dormitory. At first, she didn't understand why she was doing it, but soon, her efforts paid off. She ranked in the top 15 on a mock exam. The orphanage's attitude toward her changed completely. Not only did they provide her with the best study environment, but even those who had once treated her coldly started preparing meals for her. From that day on, she seemed to have found a new way to live. She wondered, if she became the top student in the entire school, what would happen then? She threw herself into relentless studying, fueled by stimulant-like brain-enhancing drugs. In the end, she not only took first place but also earned a scholarship. Strangely, those who had once bullied her now avoided her altogether, turning their attention to someone else. It was at this moment that the orphanage informed her that she could leave. It turned out that the family she had never met had finally found her. They had even secured her a place at the best girls' high school in Seoul, but they hadn't told her their address. So, she had no choice but to go to Seoul on her own. After arriving at the school, she found her way to the teachers, who were puzzled as to why she didn't have a parent accompanying her. She didn't explain, simply stating that she was a transfer student. Once her identity was confirmed, she was quickly assigned a class and a classroom. Unfamiliar with her surroundings, she stumbled her way to the entrance ceremony, where she overheard the student representative mention that a well-known teacher at the school had recently passed away, prompting a moment of silence. What she didn't realize at the time was that the deceased teacher was actually her father. Mistaken for an outsider, the security guard even forced her out of the event. Wandering aimlessly around campus, she eventually found her classroom, where the homeroom teacher scolded her for being late and told her to find an empty seat. However, when another transfer student arrived late, the teacher's attitude was completely different, smiling warmly instead of reprimanding. The classmates, too, seemed excited about this new arrival, making it clear that this girl had a special status. The teacher allowed her to choose any seat, and judging by the reaction of the students, everyone wanted her to sit beside them. Just then, a sudden noise interrupted the moment. Her suitcase had burst open from being overpacked. While embarrassing, this small incident unexpectedly caught the attention of the transfer girl, who chose to sit beside her. However, her worries soon came true. Later that day, some classmates cornered her in the restroom, demanding she switch seats. They warned her that if she refused, she wouldn't be allowed to leave. But before things escalated, the transfer girl suddenly appeared, grabbed her hand, and led her out. It was only then that she realized everyone seemed afraid of this girl. As they walked away, she saw the students quickly stepping aside to avoid her. Later, while eating, she noticed the girl had no drink, so she kindly offered her a bottle of water. To her surprise, the girl didn't take it. Instead, she poured it out right in front of her. Confused by this hostility, she couldn't understand why the girl would misunderstand her intentions. The girl then warned her, those chosen as the class joke never have a normal life. And now it was her turn. Most people might have brushed off such a remark, but she couldn't ignore it. She had noticed 3 deep scars on the girl's wrist. Though she didn't fully understand the story behind them, her own past experiences with bullying made her extra cautious. Previously, the class had tried to integrate her into their small social circles, but she was just a girl from a small town. No background, no wealth. In contrast, those around the transfer girl were either top students or came from influential families. She had assumed they got along because they were both transfer students. But after learning more, she realized this girl wasn't new at all. She was, in fact, the most famous student in the entire school. Not only was she strikingly beautiful, but she also ranked first in academics. What baffled her even more was that, despite only arriving that day, the girl already knew her name, something she hadn't told anyone. It turned out the girl had found her keychain, mistakenly thinking she was planning to apply to Korea University. She denied it, brushing it off, but the girl was serious about that goal, having private tutors and attending numerous prep classes. Their difference in status was like night and day. Becoming friends with this girl might be beneficial, but it also came with immense pressure. Feeling uneasy, she quietly switched seats with another student. But when the girl arrived in class, she demanded to switch again, insisting on sitting next to her. The entire class was shocked. No one had ever dared refuse this girl before. Yet, she didn't seem angry and simply accepted the situation. Soon after, the person who had helped with her school admission provided her with an address. Thinking she was finally returning home, she went there, only to find a strange woman answering the door. That was when she learned the truth. Her mother had passed away the year she went missing, and her father had also recently died. She was now completely alone. Just then, her stepmother reached out to her. She had assumed it was to bring her home for her father's funeral. Her stepmother questioned her about her father's belongings, and it was only then that she realized the true reason behind the sudden concern. Her stepmother wanted his phone. Only direct family members could retrieve it from the police station. However, she lied, claiming she hadn't found the phone among his belongings. She wanted to see for herself what secrets it might hold. When she finally got her hands on the phone, she tried multiple passwords but failed every time. Then, suddenly, an unknown number called. She answered, but there was only silence on the other end. It felt as if the caller was merely testing whether the phone was still active. The next day at school, a classmate who had been friendly to her just the day before suddenly spilled milk tea all over her uniform. At first, she thought it was an accident, but then the student blocked her path, sneering that her clothes had a strange smell. Turning around, she saw the entire class staring at her with mocking expressions. The uniform had been one she bought online the previous night because the teacher had criticized her for not wearing one. The seller had given her vague directions, making her wander around a narrow alley before finally reaching the pickup spot, where a wealthy young man in a luxury car handed her the uniform from an underground garage. Even then, she had felt something was off, but she had no other options. What she didn't know was that someone had been watching her from the shadows, secretly recording everything. After the milk tea incident, she went to a laundromat and scrubbed the uniform multiple times. Yet, when she returned to school the next day, someone still found an excuse to target her. The whole situation reminded her of the bullying she had suffered at her previous school, but once again, she felt powerless to fight back. Quietly, she took her stained clothes to the restroom to clean them. Just then, the transfer girl named Yuri appeared with a fresh set of clothes, as if she had anticipated this. This only deepened her suspicion. Was Yuri behind everything? Was this all punishment for switching seats? She refused the offer, but instead of being annoyed, Yuri seemed thrilled, as if she enjoyed the resistance. Returning to class, she was greeted with the first mock exam. The teacher handed out the test papers and announced that they had only 20 minutes to complete it. But as she looked at the questions, she realized they were far beyond their grade level. Yet, her classmates calmly began writing, as if they had seen the questions before. She started to suspect that they had already studied this material in a tutoring program. After the exam, the teacher announced the passing scores, but her name wasn't on the list. She chased after the teacher, desperate to know her score, only to be met with sarcasm. She had once expected great things from her after hearing she had ranked first at her previous school, but now she couldn't even pass. She even implied that her past achievements had been the result of cheating. To make matters worse, She hinted that all the test questions had been covered in an elite tutoring program, one that the school did not officially teach. But how could she afford to attend something like that? Later, she overheard whispers in the hallway. As she approached, she saw students glancing at their phones and laughing. She snatched a girl's phone and saw the screen, photos of her washing her uniform in the restroom. Someone had been waiting for her, secretly taking pictures, and spreading false rumors online. Not long after, she received a mysterious message with information about the tutoring program. Looking around, she saw no one nearby. The program had somehow predicted every single test question. Curious but unable to afford it, she decided to investigate. But when she inquired about the fees, she realized it was impossible. She couldn't even afford it on an installment plan. As she was leaving, she heard a lecture coming from one of the classrooms. Thinking quickly, she pulled out her phone, planning to secretly record the session. But just as she started, the front desk receptionist caught her, forcing her to run. She managed to slip into an elevator, the doors opened, and standing there, waiting for her, was Yiri. Yiri placed her hat on her head and told her to hide on the rooftop for now, promising to notify her when it was safe to leave. Alone on the rooftop, she looked around. The environment felt eerily similar to a place where she had once been bullied. Fear gripped her as she covered her ears, trying to block out the memories. Suddenly, heavy rain began to fall. At that moment, a hand reached out to her, but she could no longer tell, was Yiri an angel here to save her, or a demon leading her into hell? Later, she took her to her father's old estate. In front of her father's subordinates, she played along, pretending to take their medication and undergo their tests, before secretly vomiting the pills back out. She had brought the girl there for a reason. A custom-made school uniform awaited her, tailored perfectly to her size. She had secretly measured her during their last encounter. She had even considered gifting her shoes but hesitated, fearing she might use them to run away. But this wasn't just about kindness. She wanted something in return. She wanted to know her secret, how she had managed to excel academically without the help of elite tutors. She offered a trade, the tutoring center's materials in exchange for her study methods. But she refused. She said her methods were useless here. Besides, she was the top student. Why would she need advice from someone else? Before she could think further, her two best friends suddenly arrived. She couldn't let them find out about her plan, so she hid the girl in a wardrobe. Outside, the two friends started gossiping, talking about the girl behind her back. To protect her, she covered the girl's ears. Just then, a message notification popped up on the girl's phone. The two friends turned toward the wardrobe, suspicious. But at the last second, she used another message alert to lure them downstairs. Afterward, she led the girl to safety. Unexpectedly, the girl gave her a small charm as a token of gratitude. Finally, she had made progress. That night, her father drove her home. Out of nowhere, he mentioned the girl. She panicked. She had deliberately arranged for the girl to fail a test, hoping to keep her off their father's radar. Because she knew, her father would eliminate anyone who posed a threat. But as she thought about it, she realized something strange. She hadn't seen her sister in a long time. Just yesterday, the entire class had laughed at her. But today, someone had suddenly given her an flower. Even the classmate who had poured milk tea on her had disappeared, missing for 3 days. When she asked the teacher, she found out that person's phone had been turned off. The classmates whispered among themselves, convinced that the recent transfer student had something to do with the sudden disappearance of someone in their class. After all, she had specifically requested to sit in that seat today, and her relationship with the class queen had suddenly become close. The rumors grew even more intense when, during the class president election, she was unexpectedly nominated by Yiri, even though the position had originally been reserved for Tuijian. The two had even agreed on it beforehand, but now that Yiri had recommended someone else, the teacher had no choice but to write both names on the board and let the students vote. To Tuijian's shock, the votes in favor of the newcomer were higher. Furious at losing the class president position, Tuijian stormed to the podium and flipped through the ballots, only to discover that all the ones with the winner's name were written in the exact same handwriting. It was clear someone had cheated. Yet, the teacher did not take her side and only made her vice president. Tuijian secretly took the voting slips home and scanned them, hoping to uncover more evidence. To her surprise, she discovered something unusual. the handwriting matched Yuri's own. Her anger deepened. Then, she noticed a nearby document, an old medical record belonging to Soljiai, the new transfer's father. The records claimed that Soljiai's father had been rushed to the hospital due to severe stomach pain, but he had died shortly after arrival. The attending doctor at the time? None other than Yuri's father. If Tuijian could dig up something incriminating, she could drive a wedge between Soljiai and Yuri. Meanwhile, Soljiai was still eagerly waiting for a date that never arrived. Thinking she had been stood up again, she wandered alone into an alleyway. Little did she know, Yuri had been watching her from above the entire time. Before long, Yuri approached her, playfully grabbing a microphone tube and starting to sing with her as if they were old friends. Soljiai, who had always been overlooked by everyone, felt seen for the first time in her life. Later, Yuri took Soljiai back to her house. Soljiai felt like prey being dragged into a hunter's den, her nerves on edge. Her eyes landed on the ocean-themed decorations on the walls, which led to a conversation about swimming. They even made plans to go together sometime. But the thought of swimming with Yuri made Soljiai blush. As if sensing this, Yuri suddenly started undressing right in front of her. Seeing Soljiai's flustered reaction, Yuri smirked and teased her. Was she imagining something inappropriate? But in the end, Yuri simply changed into sleepwear. Soljiai was left to sleep alone. But in her dreams, things played out very differently. She and Yuri were holding each other, growing even more intimate. The dream was so intense that she jolted awake. Unable to sleep, she got up to use the bathroom and accidentally spotted Yuri's phone lighting up. It was a message from the student who had bullied her before, pleading for mercy. Curiosity got the better of him, and she scrolled through the messages. They mentioned something about deleting a video. That was when it clicked. This was why that student hadn't shown up to school in days. Yuri had some kind of leverage over them. The next morning, Yuri woke up to find that the person who had been sleeping beside her was gone. She quickly checked the GPS tracker on her phone and sighed in relief. She had secretly installed a tracker on Soljiai's phone the night before. Today, she had prepared a special surprise for her. But when she arrived at school, Soljiai deliberately avoided her. Finding this odd, she followed her and eventually led her to the administrative office. There, the student who had previously bullied Soljiai was in the process of transferring schools. This was the surprise she had arranged for her. However, Soljiai didn't seem particularly happy about it. Later, in their literature class, Soljiai's essay received the highest score, even surpassing Yuri's. The teacher, out of respect for privacy, didn't reveal the contents of her essay, which only made the entire class even more curious. What had Soljiai written? Then, during lunch, her essay mysteriously went missing. No matter how much she searched, she couldn't find it. Even worse, someone had not only stolen it but also printed out copies and placed them in every classmate's desk. Furious, Yuri went around collecting all the printed copies and warned everyone not to read them. She seemed to already know what the essay contained. But Soljiai wasn't angry. Instead, she asked to speak with her privately. After all, the essay was about her own personal growth. If people knew about it, so be it. What she didn't understand was why Yuri seemed even more upset than she was. That was when she realized, on the night she had seen the desperate texts from the bullied student, she had also discovered something else. Yuri had been secretly collecting information on her for years, from childhood records to details about her father. She wanted to know, why had she done all of this? Soljiai had no idea that the information stored in Yuri's phone actually came from her father's safe. For a long time, Yuri's older sister had been absent from home. Her family told her that her sister had gone away to study elsewhere, but she never believed them. One night, she secretly opened her father's safe, hoping to find clues about her sister's whereabouts. Instead, she found Soljiai's personal records. On impulse, she took photos of the documents, unknowingly creating what Soljiai would later mistake as evidence of her spying on her. Meanwhile, Soljiai went home and recalled what the deputy class president had mentioned about her stepmother being involved in a legal battle. While searching the house, she stumbled upon a 5 billion insurance policy. Inside the document folder, she also found a letter titled Karma and Retribution. It turned out that her stepmother had been planning to secretly claim the insurance payout. But what confused her the most was, if she wanted to keep this from her, Why had she gone to such great lengths to bring her back from the orphanage in the first place? Determined to uncover the truth, she needed a reason to stay in town, and the upcoming midterm exams provided the perfect excuse. But for that, she had to get a good score. However, she fell asleep while reviewing, even leaving her pen on the open textbook. The truth was, her past study methods had relied on stimulant medication to forcefully enhance her focus, but now she had run out of pills. With only 7 days left until the exams, she went to a clinic to get a new prescription. To her frustration, the clinic required a medical checkup before they would prescribe anything, and the cost was an outrageous 240,000 yuan. She tried visiting other clinics, but all of them either demanded checkups or outright refused to sell the medication to a student. Left with no other options, she reached out to some old friends from the orphanage, but they only asked her for money instead of offering help. Running out of time, she turned to the internet, searching for illegal sellers. Just as she found one, the seller immediately asked for a code. Confused, she stared at their profile picture, and then it hit her. She had received a small note box in class a few days ago. Rummaging through her belongings, she found it and flipped it over, revealing a string of numbers on the back. It turned out that the seller had given her this code in advance to verify her identity. She sent the code and requested the medication. The seller responded with a pickup location, instructing her to place the money in a designated warehouse. However, Solji didn't take the pills right away. Instead, she hid nearby, waiting to see who would come to collect the money. To her shock, the person who arrived was none other than Yiri. She asked her to keep this a secret and even offered her a stronger, more effective medication. But Solji wasn't convinced. She chased after her, demanding that she return her money. Before she could figure out the truth about her father, she wasn't willing to accept any favors from her. Solji didn't want to owe Yiri anything, but she made her an offer she couldn't refuse. If she could score first place in the upcoming exam, she would reveal all her secrets to her, everything she wanted to know. To make things more tempting, she even handed her a set of study materials, as if she had prepared them in advance just for her. Faced with such a huge temptation, she had no reason to refuse. The moment she got her hands on the pills, she took them immediately. To her surprise, the effect of this new batch was far stronger than the previous ones. Her first attempt at the exams had ended in failure, but this time, she miraculously ranked first in the entire school. Her classmates looked at her with suspicion. How could someone who couldn't even afford tutoring suddenly surpass them all? Just then, the delinquent who had once offered her a job suddenly appeared. Before coming to Seoul, Solji had secretly collected a stash of pills from her old job, but now she had run out. The delinquent demanded that she repay the cost of the drugs within a week. If not, she would make sure Solji lost her chance to continue her education forever. Broke and desperate, Solji had no idea where to get that kind of money. Before she could figure out a solution, another problem arose. The school had arranged a mandatory medical checkup for the top 20 students. If the test revealed traces of the stimulants she had taken before the exam, would her results be invalidated? As her classmates waited for her downfall, Yuri suddenly sent her a message. She was her last hope. She rushed to the rooftop, where she was already waiting for her. She dropped to her knees, begging her to help her once more, even saying she was willing to sign any kind of settlement agreement. Yuri pulled her up and took out another vial of liquid from her pocket. She had been prepared all along. But what was the real purpose behind her carefully orchestrated plans? Before she could dwell on that, she suddenly woke up to a shocking sight. Her wealthy best friend was stealing from a classmate. Strangely, they didn't take any valuables, only a simple bracelet. Curious, she got up and secretly followed her, but a doctor noticed her and told her to go back to rest. Left with no choice, she returned to the rest area and observed the girl who had lost the bracelet. Determined to uncover the truth, she sent someone to track her best friend. Before long, they reported back. Her friend had been acting strangely, searching for a Samsung phone charger all evening. But she distinctly remembered that they didn't use a Samsung phone. That meant they must have another phone. She immediately ordered her informant to find a way to get their hands on it. That night, she brought Solji to a school event. Her father, who never attended such gatherings, unexpectedly showed up. But it wasn't to see her. Her father was there to meet her best friend. As it turned out, Her father had already bribed them into being her informant at school. Even more shocking, the extra phone they had been searching for all night actually belonged to Solji. It had been confiscated from her. The reason they were so desperate for a charger was that the phone had run out of battery. Meanwhile, the moment her best friend met with her father was captured in secret photos. Seeing this evidence, she could no longer sit still. That phone had to contain something important. Otherwise, why would his best friend go to such lengths to secretly hand it over to her father? But from the photos, she noticed that they weren't holding the phone when they left. That meant the phone had to be somewhere they had just been. She rushed to the storage shed where they had lingered earlier. Right at that moment, a phone started ringing under a table. She quickly found it and answered the call, but there was only silence on the other end. Without hesitation, she ran to the restroom, flipped open Solji's file, and entered the date of Solji's disappearance as the password. To her astonishment, it worked. She had expected to find secrets about Solji, but instead, what she saw shocked her to her core. Her missing sister was in the videos on this phone. Could there be a connection between her disappearance and the death of Solji's father? Determined to uncover the truth, she tracked down the location where the videos had been filmed. It was inside the school. Just as she was about to investigate further, a commotion erupted outside. He rushed to the window and looked down. Solji was being cornered with a knife by another female classmate, being forced back step by step. She was about to rush down to save Solji when, suddenly, someone entered the room and shut the door behind them. The figure slowly walked toward her. When she finally got a clear look at their face, she was struck speechless in shock. It was his long-lost sister. Thanks for watching. Please like and drop a heart for part 2.